My guest is former writer turned associate editor for IGN Entertainment, a gaming podcast megastar with multiple co-hosting duties for the Gangcast, the Indie Council, and Pew Pew Bang, which of course is a part of MinnMax, which they also appear on their main show. Oh yeah, she was also on the reboot of P.S. I Love You, the PlayStation podcast with two other jabronis at Kinda Funny Games, a fellow Hispanic, and most importantly, a former Chicagoan. Janet, I like to run marathons, Garcia. Janet Garcia, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is the first time that we're ever communicating via camera, and so what a perfect time to talk to it during one of the hardest parts of video games, which of course is the game of the year time, where people are just scattering to get their thoughts out and also getting ready to the big show. So what are you currently doing around this time?
I'm almost giving up, but I don't think I've quite given up just yet. Like a lot of people, this is the time to, I think, either finish things you're already working on or get to things that you haven't gotten to. Sometimes circle back to stuff that you started in terms of games, just trying to prepare for those end of year conversations. So yeah, this is at the time of us recording. This is the week where MinnMax is going to do a lot of their big end of the year content, awards, 210s, which is like essentially like a top 20 games list that we make and debate collectively. I have a little bit more time for other stuff like my own personal top 10. I'll either drop that near the end of the month or the beginning of January or something. And then for ReMap Radio, which I'm also on, that is normally done in January. So I have a little bit more time there. And then for Indie Council, we already did ours, which was done like a week before. So yeah, there's kind of just like deadlines, different deadlines like in the ether passing you by at this time. And right now I'm working on, I sort of have done this like triage style. I kind of looked a few weeks ago at what are the games that I haven't played yet that I feel like a lot of my colleagues really revere that I also think that I have a chance to like, and then sort of moving from there top down based on how much clout the game has, for lack of a better term. And
Got you.
And then deciding like, do I finish that? Do I not? And then just kind of like rapidly going through them, though the rapidity is not as fast as I would like it to be.
While also juggling life, because a lot of this tends to happen during some of the more busier times of the year, December, where we're having many different type of holidays. So bouncing all that, how are you holding up? How are you holding at least in 2025?
I wish I was holding better. I ended up getting sick from, I was very lucky to get to be part of this convention called Really Rad Weekend that happens in Florida, which was super cool. I did that on behalf of Pew Pew Bang. We did a panel, super fun, got to be in person, remote work, blah, blah, yay. Got really sick. And a lot of people have been really sick. So I like have been battling being varying degrees of sick for like the last 3 to like pushing 4 weeks. It's like the longest I've been sick in my life. So that definitely has slowed me down in some spots. But other than that, which is like nothing, things have been fairly smooth. I have a pretty low key holiday like lifestyle. You know, I'm living in LA right now, and I basically stick to just being in LA. Like I don't go home for the holidays or anything like that. Like a lot of my family's here, so I'm lucky that those things are really low key, and I don't have like kids or anything. So in the grand scheme of life, I don't have that much I have to do, and I am kind of constantly like, well, it could be worse, as the saying goes, right? So
very true.
You know, okay, doing okay.
Okay, good. Yeah. You're maintaining both life and also work and fun, because a lot of this is coming from a part of medium that it's supposed to be fun, right? We also push ourselves as creators and creatives to make sure that we try to put ourselves out there and do as much as we possibly can. So I can see how like trying to balance that and also do fun things, but also being sick, and then but also want to do a couple of other things. So like, yeah, that's a lot to take, but I think you're doing in stride. I already actually before recording, I watched your predictions of what the Game Awards will be. So that was a fun conversation over on the Gangcast. So very fun. Look, also everyone check out your stuff, by the way. I'd love seeing you whenever you pop up. So you're also constantly popping up on my TikTok algorithm. So whatever you guys are doing over there at Pew Pew Bang, it's working. So again,
great. Yeah,
love seeing it out there. But in terms of game of the year, for even like not just the Keeleys in general, like what was your first thought? Like, oh, the celebration of this time. What were your first introduction to that? For me, it was the Giant Bomb, Giant Bomb doing their sort of end of the year podcast celebrations. What was that introduction to you?
That's a great question. I honestly, like, I kind of hate to say it, but I think it might be in a way the Keeleys. I mean, I think I've been reading video game content for a number of years, but I feel like uh I don't really have a strong memory of like the old magazines I read having a big end of year presence. I'm sure they did do top 10 lists, but it didn't really feel like it had the same weight. Like I read a lot of like EGM and then a couple other magazines at the time. But yeah, it might be a little mix of the Game Awards, probably thrown in with, I think, once I started being part of different outlets, like in a more formal setting in my career, and having those outlets, you know, whether it was like IGN, where I kind of first got my more mainstream start, where a lot of people know me from, or Kind of Funny, which is like another, you know, big outlet name. I think those were when the years kind of really started to be like marked as like game of the year. Like, I think we talk a lot about um sometimes you can be cynical and I think look at the end of year time, even outside of games, as being like, who cares, it's arbitrary, the months go by, it's all made up anyway. And that is true, because like time is inherently like constructed, it's just like what we use to keep track of change and things going by. But we also like give those things meaning, like they're meaningful because we gave meaning to them. And I think Game of the Year is a lot like that to me, where it's sort of the reason to push ourselves, to try to play more, to try to be more thoughtful. It's what it all amounts to. So I do think it's easy to be sort of cynical about Game of the Year in some ways, but that's kind of been like my intro to it, like working alongside colleagues and trying to have expertise and kind of come together with like a shared, here's all the work we've individually done and how we can kind of like riff off of each other or learn from one another.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of Game of the Year, is that it is the time in which we're having more conversations about reflecting back on games from the previous that sometimes people forget about. Like some people forgetting that Obsidian is insane and has released 3 games this year. Like remembering that, Grounded 2 exists, remembering Avowed happened this year. The fact that they're just coming off of, Outer Worlds. But then other games like smaller titles, so like Blueprints, people that came out pretty early on, and everyone at that time, for me, from what I was hearing, was like, hey, this is Game of the Year. And now we're really kind of going deep on this Clear Obscura, right? Like we're really reflecting on, because, and a lot of it, some people might think that games are sort of recency bias, right? It's that recently game that you play that now is taking over the mindset. But this is a good time for the conversations that, like, for me, like I said, the Giant Bomb cast, or even Giant Bomb in general, whenever they do their end of the year sort of come together and have their conversations, those are definitely like one of my first things of like having an actually working out with like your individual peers and hearing out where their thoughts and seeing where they're coming from, and the argument of left and right of what to keep, what to not, what makes sense, even if sometimes it's a little silly. And I still think that's obviously what makes it entertaining. It's funny. I think it really does step back before even the Keeleys, before they were the Game Awards. They were the Spike Game Awards back then. And even then, those were not taken seriously. Where do you feel that the Game Awards in the current times, like I know that people try to compare the Keeleys or the Game Awards as the Oscars. Do you think we've reached that prestige yet for Game of the Year, even for like that level?
I mean, I think prestige, no, just inherently because, video games are so much younger than film. Like they're like infinitely younger than film. So I don't even think in our lifetime, like games will reach that level of prestige. And I think that's like fine. It's gonna, things take time. Because again, it's a younger medium. And also I think inherently the structure is just like so different. The Game Awards that Keeley currently runs does feel, at least in watching it, so much more centered on the need to generate enough revenue to continue the show going. And you feel that in like the stuff that feels like a sponsored slot but isn't explicitly stated as a sponsored slot. Like you see that in like the brand deals, you see that in the like need to generate quote unquote hype. Like I think it's tough because it's just a different medium where it is so much of a more both consumerist but also a medium that requires action. Like you can't just put on a game and have consumed it. Like you do have to sit and play and spend time with it. Some of these games are like hard to play. Like sometimes you sit down and you're like, I want to make this amount of progress, and you can't because you don't have the skill yet or whatever, or you get stuck and hit a roadblock. And then, so it's so much of a different relationship. But because of that difference, we have like the concept of hype weighs so much heavier in the game industry than it does in film or TV or anything else. So such that to have the Game Awards have a little bit as much attention as it does, a big thing that draws a lot of people in are the trailers or what might show up. That's never been a drawing point for me. Like, I feel like I can get that from other showcases. I don't really need that in my awards. I would prefer if it was more hippy dippy, let people talk in the way that they do it, like the GC Awards or the BAFTAs games category or many other shows. So yeah, like it's definitely not at that level of prestige, but I do think it adds to the formality of the season where now we have like different ways to have game of the year, which I think is really fun. We have game of the year, what ends up being the result of Jeff Keighley's Game Awards, which, I and many people in the industry are like voting members in. So it's not like I'm totally detached from that completely, but I'm like one, vote among many. But there's like that, like what does the collective industry think? And then what does your outlet think? And then what do you think? So I like the Russian nesting doll effect that Game Awards season has. And like part of that is that show. And I think, it's fine to be critical of it. I'm plenty critical of many of the things Jeff Keighley has like chosen or not chosen to do in his tenure, but I'm not going to pretend like I am not excited to see the results of it, because I am. Like, I think it's an imperfect thing, but all of the things are imperfect in terms of how we decide game of the year, top 10, however you end up doing, whether it's the very long form conversations that Giant Bomb has, which literally brought me through my marathon when I ran it. I saved one of those episodes for, I'm like, I need like a good several hours of content and listen to that for like the first half. Or it's, written articles or like NPR's megalit. Like there's so many ways to do it. And I think that helps feed into the fact that like, this is what the season is, because we're all doing the same kind of things. Like we're all doing our little projects and we're all like sort of presenting them to the world and getting to consume each other's content. Like this is one of the few times where like I don't have a lot of time to consume game content because I spend so much time like making it or like taking a break from it. But this is the one thing where if I'm going to listen to your show, it's going to be your Game of the Year episode, because it's like that's the big one to tune in for. And I feel like there's something really exciting about that and special about that.
Yeah, especially when it's like, for me, you're absolutely correct. This is the time where I will listen to things or I will experience things that I don't normally wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to do it, only because I do want to still, it's funny. It's like the high of the conversation, right? It's me having the conversation with someone, but then I also like, for instance, I'm actually going to be watching the Game Awards. I will be in Nashville with my friends who are work at comicbook.com, and I'm going to be watching with them. But immediately after we're done and like everyone's gone to bed, I'm loading up Kind of Funny. I'm loading up, like all these different streamers, and I'm watching this thing again because I want to see the reactions. I want to see it, like I want to be in that conversation with those people and hear their thoughts and their reaction. So it ultimately does. But what I also like about this time frame is that, yes, Keighley's seems to be like the head of, or not the head, but like the face of big, award giving time. But then there's wonderful smaller ones, like, of course, the Indie Game Awards, who I want to shout out my friend 61 Indie for throwing purely just because they believe in it, and to have support for them to do something like that in a time where, it's a showcase, right? It's for these things. To me, the Game Awards are always have been the MTV Movie Awards. They just try to pretend like they're not, but secretly they're always just we're programs for other things to come. But also, here are the awards. I do feel like having those special, like specificity, like different other shows such as the Indie Awards, the DICE, like you said, the BAFTA one specifically for the game category. Those also are wonderful conversations. And I wish that a lot of people have or will experience it. I know that there are those few, but I also wish that they were pushed more. If anything, I would kind of wanted Jeff Keighley, how he does the Summer Games Fest, where really it's just an advent calendar of other people's stuff that just so happens to be around that time frame. I wish that was something similar to this, where there is a cross thing of like him bringing and elevating the rest of the industry. But ultimately, that's up to us as as a sort of content crowd to really try and elevate that and tell people, hey, you should really check out MinnMax's Game of the Year conversation. Hey, you should really reach out and reach 6-1 Indie in their conversation. You should do all this. So I really am sort of like, it's both fun and interesting to see these happening, grow and change and see how that goes. But yeah, for sure. When it comes to, say, the last several years, in terms of what has been considered, have you ever had a situation where there wasn't a game that is given prestige that you necessarily were not expecting or was an upset to you? I know that there's some people back in then when there was the Dragon Age Inquisition, there were some people that were like really not for that decision. Has there been a year or been a time that you've had that?
A little bit. I think, I sometimes hesitate to talk too much about that because it just seemed like inherently a little mean.
It is inherently a little,
It's like, this game doesn't deserve this thing. I think there's, but it's interesting. It's kind of a two-part question, like my personal thoughts and then what am I surprised by?
Sure.
It's like, from like a personal perspective, like I really didn't like Donkey Kong Bonanza, but I wasn't surprised to see it there because it's so critically
me and you,
acclaimed.
by the way, we are locked in sister and brother on that because
that let's go.
So like I was enjoying a lot of that game and then I was like, I'm not having fun at all anymore because you just keep going and I don't want to play you anymore.
It's a beefy boy, but I think beyond that kind of level of granular, again, that wasn't a surprise because I think it was a very critically acclaimed game. You can kind of read the tea leaves of the Metacritics and the conversations that happen throughout the year. I think the only things that have really like surprised me and a critique I have of the structure of the Game Awards is the stuff that feels like inherently incorrect. Where it's like Bonanza getting nominated, it's like I don't agree, but I don't think it's incorrect, versus like Sifu as a fighting game. I was like, I don't think this should be in there. Like this seems, and admittedly, again, I'm not gonna, and I don't also have my ballot memorized. And again, I'm one of many outlets that vote in the Game Awards, but it feels like that's just incorrect, and it makes me wonder. And I don't know the answer to this behind the scenes. Like, how wrong can we be? And like, the team that runs the Game Awards will just be like fine with that. Like, that seems kind of like a bit messy. I don't really agree with that. And then I think, on a similar vein, the other things that stand out for me for Game Awards, where I'm like, oh, I'm not so sure about this, is this is something I try to work on because I vote in the Game Awards, is like expertise within like very niche things. So like I stand by the fact that like I think there should be, a bespoke team that does the nominations for like best sound design. I mean, sound design is something I work really hard on gaining expertise in. Like I've gone to GC a couple times. I always hit up the sound design talks. I, play music in my free time. Like I do try to elevate like my understanding of that sector. But that's like one thing versus like, there's so many other aspects of like graphical fidelity or like OSTs. Like, what does it really take to make a good composition versus something that like someone who just has ears thinks sounds good. Like it is a different level of listening. And like, I'll be the first to admit that I don't think I am quite at that level of skill for like having a trained ear. Like people spend their whole lives becoming experts in some of these categories. So I do wish there was like a little bit more, I think, tact with that a little bit. So that's the closest I get to like maybe disagreeing with things. I think it's really just the weird genre categorizations, especially things like best family game, where it's like I still don't know what that means and I vote in it. That seems like a problem, right? Like, do you know what a best family game is? Like, what makes something a family game?
I could play, but like no, you're absolutely correct. It's just like, am I looking for something just for kids? Am I looking for something to play with my significant other? Like, what does that mean? Like, if anything, is it a co-op category?
Found family?
Yeah, exactly. Like, cool. Then let's put Claire Obscura in the found family section there. That would make more sense to me. Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely correct when it comes to like the different categories where you see something like the Sifu situation where I'm like, something is not like the other. And it's just for them to really fill in a space when really I think it could have been something that really you didn't need to just add it. It could just be the 3 games that come out in that category. I know that we're in an age where we don't get as many fighting games. Sometimes there's years where there's just too many. But at the same time, there are categories like there was the whole discussion, of course, with is Dave the Diver an indie game, right? Well, it's being pushed like that. And like I can understand some of the arguments both left and right on that one. ultimately, I do think that like we have to find the set rules. Like, is it a small team that's what makes this indie? Is it the fact that they have publishing, demands behind the scenes that it's allowing this to happen? Like, it is an interesting discussion when it comes to when the different categories there when you're trying to figure out like, hey, what is the best fit for this, but not having that specificity behind the scenes of like who's deciding that. And like you were saying, like in the music thing, like I'm sure that there are composers that do participate, but then also does their vote way higher than say like someone who doesn't have a focus? Like I think it's funny when like I watch, obviously I'm a kind of funny fan. They do their sort of like go through the different categories, and it's always usually when it comes to like the streaming in terms of like streamer of the year or like the sports, the esports and stuff like, yeah, exactly. It's just like, I mean, if you don't have a main focus on that, like, is that something that you should even be put? I'm curious about behind the scenes for that. I am actually not sure. So like, and I don't know how much you can actually say about the rewards or the behind the scenes of doing that, but like, essentially you're giving a list of things to pick from and then you choose, right? That's essentially it.
So for yeah, you're right in that I don't think I can go into like
you can't go into
there's not a lot of detail to go. There's not a lot of detail to go into. I mean, it's a blank like. So there's two elements. There's like nominations and then voting.
Yes.
The nominations part, it's like a white ballot essentially.
You're
putting that you're putting things out there.
Yes.
And then obviously, the nominees are publicly facing, like we then vote on the nominees.
Yes.
So anything can, I guess, happen in that first space, and there's not really like, knowledge on it's like everyone comes to like it's interesting because it's much more, I guess, in that sense, like what you conceptualize as democratic than other awards I've been a part of, where like I've been a part of like awards shows where it's like a team of experts that are pretty small and they're debating. So it's not necessarily like just voting. It's like a different kind of format. So so it's just but there's going to be flaws in every system. I don't think that it means you shouldn't criticize the systems.
Sure.
But like there's no such thing as it being perfect because there's like just too many factors to come into play, too many backgrounds, too many like extra things to account for. And then I also am a big believer in the fact that game of the year or your top 10 of the year, even if it's just you, it's never really the game of the year or your top 10. It's the top 10 that you played that year. There's so many games, like there's been so many times where I've gone back and played games from earlier years that I missed. And I'm like, if I had played that at the time, it would have been in my top 10. It would have changed the list, the conversation. But, there's just, you're never going to get to everything. So it's like, here's what I came up with from a very limited amount of things, because inherently you only have so much time. Like most people max play 50 to maybe approaching 100 games a year. And that, I mean, just like start it, not like play it for a long amount of time. And even that's like on the more generous end. I think for most people, you're choosing from like a pretty small pot and then you're making that pot smaller. Then that's your list.
Yeah, because it's like going from, there's so many games released in a year to then just dumb it down, or even not dumb it down, to shrink it down to really just what you believe is the 15 most, when there's really maybe 25 excellent games that year that you really, really mess with. It is tough. And then even for myself, like I had to make a decision. Like I recently just played Clair Obscura all the way through just recently, and that wasn't my game of the year until it became like something like that. And that's ultimately what the video was me explaining, like, there's a game that I had no idea on my radar. Everyone talked about it. At first I ignored it until I couldn't ignore it. And then I was like, let me put a shot in through. And then it won me over by its content and by the game itself. Right. That to me is more impactful, and having those conversations of like, things can change at a rapid pace when it comes to, the stuff that you can and can't play sometimes. And also this comes to can and can't play. Most people, I would assume in the industry, will have access to that. So yes, they can play most things. There are people that, don't have access or can only play a certain limited time. And so therefore things that they would absolutely love or want to do, they just can't. Right. So to me, it's a balancing out of deciding of like, do I have time to put into, more hours of Elden Ring to make it my game of the year of that year? Like, it to me is like, I don't. I only have this limited amount, so I can only choose. So it's a tough thing. And it's all subjective at the end of the day. It is the all personal, decision of the person of like how they decide to spend their time and what ends up being on their individual list or whatever. I feel like there are a subset of people that take things maybe too personal when it comes to even subjectivity. Have you seen that when it's just like when you're talking about a game, and especially like when a game comes out, like I say Donkey Kong, no one cares. You say Donkey Kong's bad, I'm sure that you probably get some pushback.
Yeah, I mean, almost exclusively. I think that's like the job, right? Especially as you gain whether you want to attribute it to like your skill as a critic or just like simple visibility, which again, I think those things do partially go hand in hand, right? I don't think I'm where I am due to like for lack of skill, right? But also like I acknowledge the fact that I've always been me, right? But if I'm me and I'm on a bigger platform, more people will hear it. Yeah, I mean, I think people do take gaming opinions really personally, just in general. I think it's a combination of cope, but also wanting to be validated. Which like and then I think another layer to that need for validation is maybe a combo of either like lack of assurance in your own opinion or heavy respect in the other person's opinion, where it's like, oh, I really wanted you to, if there's like a critic that someone likes, like I really wanted you to say it was good because then it would be good, but you said it was bad and now I'm like upset with that. Or I think it's bad, or I think this game is good, but you think it's bad. Are you saying I'm dumb? And there's like these like weird attributions that get layered into it. Admittedly, like I, as like just someone that exists in the space as well, like can enjoy someone agreeing with my opinion. Like when I hear a take that's like the same take I have, I'm like, oh yay, like cool, that's kind of nice because I guess feel seen in a way. But I also don't like, nor should any critic really. Like as a critic, I don't really crave that. I'm curious, but I'm not craving. Like if there's a game that I played that didn't resonate, I might have like this kind of happened with me, even from being in the industry at an outside perspective. When I played Starfield through. That's a game that really didn't resonate with me. I was on the side of I don't think this game was very good. That was kind of a split game despite the like 80 Metacritic. And like I ran to this was like after my time at Kind of Funny. I ran to their review, not because I wanted them to agree with me. I just wanted to hear them talk about it because I was interested in talking about it. So like getting to hear them talk, I'm like, oh great, I get more content on this. This is a game that I've been kind of like percolating with. It's a long game. So like I made my own content, with MinnMax and like, on my own like socials and things. But I'm like, oh, I want to see what they say because I'm intrigued at what that conversation might be like, given what I know. And I think I guess it's what I would want more from the gaming community, like more of a curiosity and openness, which I've gotten that too, like, which is really cool. Response from people saying things like, oh, I don't agree with you, but like I see your perspective, or I do agree with you, but I kind of didn't know why. Like I knew I didn't like that, and that's kind of the job of the critic, right? Like to give specificity to a feeling. Like plenty of players, pretty much every player can tell you if they like a game or not, or if they think a game is good. Those are two separate things in my opinion, but like usually people can answer that question, but they might not be able to tell you why. And if they can tell you why, they might not be able to say it in a way that really means much. Just like the shooting felt good. It's like, oh, that's not really quite enough. You need to really dive deep. That's the work of what, we do here. So yeah, kind of getting a little bit off topic, but yeah, like plenty of people find that upset. Or there's also, people that get upset thinking that like, you're just saying this to be like a contrarian or whatever. But again, you never get those accusations when you like something. I also think negativity hits people more deeply than positivity does.
Yeah.
If I like a game that people don't like that much, like Horizon's like that, right? Where like Horizon's a plenty critically acclaimed game. It has good scores. PlayStation's doing just fine, right? But there's many critics that think that game is sort of boring and a little basic. I see why they think that because it is a very simple structure. I really like that game because I really connect with the combat, blah, blah. No one's ever been like, for the most part, they're not really mad that I like Horizon, but they might be mad if I didn't like, Ghost that much. Even though I think they're the same games. Like the first Ghost, I think they're both open world games. They're a little basic. They're AAA, PlayStation, they have a lot of the same station seeds. They're pretty much equally critically acclaimed. But if I'm negative on one, people tend to get a little more riled up about that. And that just kind of is what it is. I think it's human nature to be a little bit more drawn to that. And I think people end up latching maybe in unhealthy ways. But that's just, that's the job, and you can't, move thinking about that too much. I usually know going in when something's going to be, how something will be received, but it's never changed like much in regards to like my delivery or whether or not I'm excited to talk about something. I'm just like, mental note, people will probably be mad. And then I just keep it pushing.
And honestly, I think that is, in my opinion, my what I like about your authenticity about talking about something. When I hear you speak on content, you are coming from something like in terms of what you truly believe, and I can feel what you're saying, even if it's something you're saying that I don't necessarily agree with. However, you're saying it with conviction, and I can tell when you absolutely mean it. And so when it comes to like saying like, you think Horizon's basic, yeah, I think there's some elements there that is true, even though I think technically the game is amazing in terms of what you can do and the actual like mechanics and the actual gameplay and stuff like that. If I think the story is boring, or if I think that I played things that other games I feel like have done better, this just so happens to have like the Swiss Army knife of putting it all in one, and I don't necessarily vibe with it, right? Like I can see on the technical level this being something that is worthy of praise, even if I don't necessarily like or understand certain things about it, that it just doesn't work for me specifically. And I think that's what I like about that. But it does come with the territory of just being somebody on the internet and talking, right? As much as you are feeling like you're coming from an honest place, people just want to take that and run with it, and there are other different directions. So, but yeah.
I think too, another thing that I think creates a charged conversation sometimes online about it, where people can take it very personally, is I think sometimes when you are critical of a game, it shatters the illusion that people had in their mind. And I've had this for myself. Again, I don't think I react nearly as negatively as some people on the internet, but and this is the beauty of the conversations that we get to have, right? Where it's like, I think it was maybe 1 or 2 years ago. I forget when Cocoon came out. That's a game I really liked a lot. That sort of environmental puzzle game.
Yes, love Cocoon.
And that came up for like MinnMax 210s, and like I remember to this day, Leo Vader said, the game's plenty fine, but it's just a bunch of box pushing puzzles, and he's right. Like, and I never, I still think of that game the way I think of it. I still have like a pretty high critical regard, but that was a glass shatter moment for me where I'm like, wow, it actually is just a bunch of box pushing puzzles, and like, and then what do you do with that, right? Like, okay, well, with that in mind, does that lower your opinion? Does it not? But like sometimes you do need someone to that's again the work of the critic, and I think a lot of people aren't ready to have the glass shattered, or they feel like, well, you broke my toy. I was having fun with this, and now I know that it's Santa Claus isn't real, and it kind of ruins it, and then you're seen as like the bad guy for revealing that. So that's the other aspect of it, I think, as well.
I guess I have really one major thing just to ask for the end of this. Now that I don't want to ask you, obviously, what you think is going to win Game of the Year here. You already have a podcast about that. Please go check out Gangcast. They have a great conversation about that. I'm more curious of what do you think Game of the Year is next year from what the information we have now. And if you think I think it's actually tougher than we actually think is going to be Game of the Year.
Oh man, that's tough. I'm gonna pull up a most anticipated games list. I mean,
I know
GTA is definitely gonna be on there.
Yes, GTA is the big one, right? Everyone assumes that will be possibly the Game of the Year contender, but I don't know. There's something different about 2025 that, to me, Grand Theft Auto, there's a possibility that it's not going to hit the same as we all think.
I think even if it doesn't hit the same, it'll still be in there because it's GTA. It's going to be one of the, because I think the other element of Game of the Year, specifically for the Game Awards, is like in a non-negative way, because I don't think this means, I think a lot of the games that are nominated, or like games that I at least personally think are really amazing titles across whether it's Game of the Year or the other categories, but inherently like something that I know frustrates a lot of people is how mainstream like the games are, but that's because it's like it's going to be the lowest common denominator. So like, yes, I've played Despelote, and I really like that game, but the odds of everyone else also having had played it and having had liked it and having had picked it above the other thing, because that's the other element too, where it's like smaller titles. I love a lot of smaller titles, but sometimes I do prefer a bigger like I think a bigger title is a better game. So then it's like, if you lose me, where I was maybe one of the only people that played a smaller game, and all, so because GTA is like the one, because I feel like Death Stranding 2 was kind of like that too, and everyone didn't even play it. Like I feel like It got played less than Death Stranding 1 in terms of widespreadness, but I think the people that played it we're already fans. So it's like it's has I would be like really, 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 really shocked if that wasn't in there. Other than that, I'm kind of at a blank for what's the other like really heavy hitter titles that are coming out. I don't know if any come to mind for you that you can kind of tag team this a little bit.
I could maybe say some that I would think would be maybe be in contention, but again, this is also a time where Clair Obscura is like the front runner, and that came out of nowhere for a lot of people. People saw that trailer when it came out and thought it looked beautiful, but no one thought it would be at the prestige that even I would say the outlets today are saying. But like, you know, of course we have Wolverine supposedly coming out next year. We have I believe the Resident Evil series is going to be having a drop there. To me, while Grand Theft Auto to me is the obvious answer, I would love an upset. I would absolutely, to me, think that something smaller or something, you know, medium size will come in and actually, with the support of people, rise above that something that, I mean, Grand Theft Auto, juggernaut for years, right? A lot has changed. A lot has changed within the last time they released a title, even with Red Dead 2, even though that's technically somewhat of a different team. There's a lot of change where I think that it could possibly not go that way. But I don't know. There's a few options out there, but
I think on top of the titles you mentioned, again, this is just based on like some of the games that are up there. Because I do agree with you. There are times where the sort of sleeper hit can come through. And I also always say if the answers aren't obvious, it's kind of an any man's game. So I think with like this year, for instance, some of the titles we all kind of knew would be in there, right? Like Claire, Silksong, Death Stranding 2, maybe. But like the other ones were kind of like it could be anybody. Like it's like, oh, it could be Hades 2, it could be this thing, it could be Bonanza, it could be Mario Kart. Like it, you know, it was sort of just like all of those had the same level of critical acclaim and conversation. So it's just like who knows. Other big titles, 007 First Light. I could see a world where that could hit.
I could see it being in there. Sure, yeah.
Maybe Reanimal, if that ends up being good. I know we've had a lot of like, I don't know, like the indie team spinning off into another indie team, making a kind of pseudo sequel. Like that can get kind of messy. But just because some of that OG team, like from like, you know, Inside Limbo days, like those are very critically acclaimed games. And those are also marked as the sort of chosen indies of like mainstream media. And I don't say that to pretend I'm not part of mainstream media, because I'm playing like a bunch of AAA stuff like as well, you know, and I'm playing all the, you know, big indies. But in terms of like when indie coverage that's more widespread, it's going to be the stuff that has a combo of like more marketing budget but also known. And I think Reanimal, even if you don't play indie games, you know that game, you're like covering that game's getting like mainstream coverage. Like it's going to be on people's, especially if it ends up being good, it's going to be a game everyone ends up playing. If it ends up not being that good, then I think it'll just kind of fall to the wayside. But those are other standouts for me thinking of 2026.
Yeah, there is, I think, Saros, the game from the people that did Returnal. Why am I blanking on the studio's name? But yeah, I think that could potentially, I know that Returnal was widely loved in the year that came out. I don't know. I, as much as I'm like, yeah, Grand Theft Auto is going to be the thing, I'm really hoping there is another, just a sleeper hit that comes in here. I feel like, I'm not saying Hades 2 cheated. Hades 2 is funny because it's that early access of like it comes out and people really put it on the game of the year, and now they put it at 1.0, and now they get that second chance, even though it's in a year that's pretty stacked. You know, there's I still want those sleeper indie hits that come in and really shake things up. Which I guess the other part, and then we'll end it there. The time frame for what a lot of people consider the end of the year conversation. Like some people, you know, I'm not saying that Metroid Beyond would be in this conversation, but if it did, it's not even eligible, right? But it's eligible next year, so like that is an option. So like in terms of that, you know, I do find that interesting, where we kind of have to have a certain point where we're like, oh, we got to cut it off, but then that gets added to the kind of thing. So I don't know.
I do think that is a possibility.
Do you think that's been relatively fair up terms of like that they decide the time frame for when things can and cannot be selected?
I think so. The only thing that I'm sort of a little bit that I think could be improved with like the Game Awards, and I don't know if this is like public facing, and I literally don't even remember the date if I ever knew it privately, so I couldn't speak to this specifically if I wanted to, is the cutoff date in relation to when ballots are due. I don't know how offhand, like how much gap there is, because if it's like the day before, it's like, well, if the game comes out, like we always have to watch out for those edge cases, I think, when it comes to cutoffs, whether it's your personal list or like an award show or anything. But yeah, I think it makes sense to the awards are in December. The December games are considered for next year. I know sometimes people don't like that because they're like, well, it's not really the calendar year, but if you don't have space to play the game, it doesn't matter anyway, is the thing. Like even, ReMap, we do our thing in January, and it works pretty well because we do it like maybe a week or so into January. But even for that, it's like if a game comes out on like December 30th, it's like the odds of getting to that are like really low. So it's never going to be a perfect system. I think if you're doing content in December, you inherently can't include the things that are in December, and that just kind of is like how it is. And people are more excited for like in December typically. I know that's the conversation as well. Why don't we do more of these in January? But January, no one cares because it feels old. Like it feels like we're stuck in the past. I know I feel that way a little bit. As a critic and a consumer, like I want to start new. I want to have hope and freshness. I don't want to feel like I'm still talking about the stuff that I didn't finish 2 months ago. I want to just have that new notebook feeling. And Game of the Year in just January, it doesn't give a new notebook. It gives old beat up notebook.
That was always my argument when I would I used to be at Point in Progress. We would do Game of the Year videos, and I always wanted them to be at least the last week or at least the end of December, only because you're absolutely correct. If we pushed it to January, I just feel like, who cares? we're moving on. We got the next series, but like, yeah, you're absolutely correct. I feel like December does feel like the closing of the chapter, and it's hard to come when their release dates and things get pushed, and like there's games that I've been excited for that are in December, but am I going to be thinking about them next year when it comes time to doing nominations and stuff like that? That does get tough. Like Indiana Jones, I think is probably the semi victim of this, where it's possible that it had a shot last year. However, last year was also very stacked. This year, it's nominated for certain things. Hopefully it gets its flowers, but it's just one of those things, I guess. Yeah, and you're correct. That's not a perfect system, so it ends up being what it is. So I think that would be a great place for us to conclude the conversation. Again, I want to thank you so much for being here, for taking your time out of this busy season to talk to me about the Game Awards or the Game of the Year or things in general. So again, thank you so much. Where can people find you on the net? If not, let them know where they can see you.
Yeah, my handle is GameOnysus on every social media platform. That's GameOnysus. So primarily Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitch. You can read my written work at pen2pixels.com. If you want to listen to me in audio format, there's a number of podcasts that I'm a part of. They're all in my Blue Sky bio as well. But we have the Gangcast, which is the Games and Not Games podcast that I do with my husband Isaiah. We have MinnMax, which I do with a team of people. Pew Pew Bang, which is under the MinnMax company, which is an all-women video game podcast. We have the Indie Council, if you're looking to just get an indie fix. And ReMap Radio, which is basically news, what we've been playing, and then questions. And why do I feel like I'm missing one of the podcasts? If I am, I don't know.
I think you nailed it. I think you nailed it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, of course. And then hopefully we can have another conversation in the future about something else. That would be fun. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please check out the Game of the Year video that this is associated with. And did you know that Only Special Features has a Patreon where you can get this early? Inside information on projects that are coming out, as well as unreleased or cut material from the videos. I always encourage the free tier, but there are ways to help the show grow, as well as getting your name in the videos, such as this week is dedicated to Hopefully Awesome. Check out their incredibly fun YouTube channel, a hilarious husband and wife duo that I just simply adore. Thank you again for your support.